It's wonderful to have you from all over the world. I mean, literally, we are connecting three continents. We have Khurram Shroff. He's in Canada. He's in Toronto. Beautiful and sunny out there. Well, not sunny, but at least it's nice. We have George here in Dubai in the middle with us, and Kay Van Peterson in beautiful Singapore. So literally, we're connecting the world, which actually is a wonderful backdrop to our conversation today on crypto, and the future is now. Hot topic, global, no boundaries, no structures, totally decentralized. That's what's happening as far as we are concerned on this call. So it sort of fits in perfectly. It fits in perfectly. Exponential, I'm the CEO of Exponential. We are a future foresight platform, and we do all sorts of work on transformation, learning and development, and on media. And we connect all the dots together. And we're very grateful to Saxo Bank to be working with us on this series. And this is the second of the series. The first one was Outrageous Predictions with Steen Jacobsen out of Denmark. And this one is out of Singapore with Kay Van Peterson. So thanks to them. Now, moving forward, what we're going to be doing is really bringing all of you together into this conversation. But before I do that, I think setting the context is really important. The first thing is that this whole crypto revolution that we're going through, it really is like a gold rush. If you go into the 18th and 19th centuries in the US, everybody was chasing the gold. How many got it? Perhaps 1%. It's actually the folks on the side, the pick and axle guys, the jeans and Levi's. Those are the guys who made the real money at a sustainable level. So that's something we'll talk about today. We should also talk about the social impact, because what is happening now is that the impact of cryptocurrency can potentially impact societies, individuals. People will make a lot of money. A lot of them will actually lose a lot of money. And that volatility is something that we need to be looking at, because this is like monopoly money, and we need to understand value in this whole process. So that's something we'll dig into. We're also looking at a completely new ecosystem. It's a very young ecosystem. The first time a Bitcoin came out was 2009. By the time it started getting a little bit more mature, it was 2013, 14. And really, it's the last couple of years when it's just simply taken off. So we need to be able to figure out how this thing is coming together. And now, embedded at the bottom end with blockchain, we are in a key environment where it is genuinely global. So there are no boundaries. Everything is overlapping and then moving forward from there. So today we'll talk about Bitcoins. We'll also talk about some other coins that are out there and how many will succeed. Today, Coinbase, I was reading the news. They were saying that over 90% of all the coins that exist today will no longer exist, and even with very minor corrections. So this is one of the key things that came out. Another thing that came out was these folks, El Salvador, becoming one of the first countries that potentially will go and become a haven for a safe haven for cryptocurrencies. We also will be talking about NFTs and an investment perspective of how people will move forward. So this basically starts giving us some context and some idea of where we are going. So without further ado, I'll invite our associates in Singapore, firstly, Kay Van Peterson, to give your perspective, exactly what you do and your macro view of the way forward.
Thanks, Tarek. And again, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are globally, everyone. I don't think I could have said it better, Tarek. You know, it's very decentralized kind of panel that we have here, which is very much the spirit of the space. So just a quick rehash. My name is Kay Van Peterson, or KVP for short. I have the privilege and honor of being a global macro strategist out here for Saxo Bank in Singapore, where I've been since 2014, and also very lucky to be in Singapore as well. And pretty much been covering crypto and digital assets since 2014 as the crazy guy in the corner, as is all things when they're kind of new. And it's been, really interesting to kind of be talking about it from back all the way then, obviously seeing the inception into kind of, the bull market initially that we had in kind of 2017, where I think a lot more people caught wind of what was going on. Obviously the crazy bare nuclear winter market afterwards, where, you know, asset prices in some cases went more than 80% lower in the cases of Bitcoin. And as Tarek also pointed out, a lot of tokens that will never be remembered that when completed kind of zero. And then interesting now to see, you know, just 4 years later, how different things are in 2021 in, you know, what I still believe is a new bull market. So I don't, by no means do I feel I'm an expert, and the people that I know that breathe, sleep, and eat crypto every day will also tell you it's almost impossible to kind of keep up on what's kind of happening. I would like to just offer maybe just a quick macro meta view, if you will. My job here is really more to just maybe give some of you some food for thought. Think of it, the space, in maybe a different way. It's not to convince you. I'm obviously an advocate. I've obviously also been invested for many years. So I'm as biased as a politician looking for a re-election, right? So I'd like to maybe summarize it in 3 kind of little key points, right? 1, we'll take financials. I'll give you context, maybe how to think about kind of the space. 2, I'll take it to numbers that are different. So it's going to be more people of different kind of, I guess you could say, technological kind of, you know, innovations as, again, a potential blueprint of thinking about the space. And then the 3rd will be a little bit more of an ad hoc, right? So meta view, like, you know, if you think about crypto right now, the total value of the listed crypto tokens, and if you go to coinmarketcap.com, you can see there's over 10,000 tokens. There's about $1.5 trillion in value. So what does that mean, right? If you think about global wealth, it's probably 400 trillion. If you actually think about investable assets, it's probably much less, 160 trillion. If you think about global equities, it's over 100 trillion, and probably the US equity market is obviously the biggest slice of that. That's $50 trillion. If you think about global family office wealth, it's probably about the same, 50 trillion. And if you think about the value of gold globally, that's 11 trillion, right? So I think this is kind of the important thing to just think in context. So you look at Bitcoin, depending on where the price is, 30 to 40K range, which we've been in for quite a few weeks, you know, it's around 720 billion, or actually, wait, 600 billion now. Also tells you something about kind of the volatility in the space. But what does that mean? That means it's under, you know, 0.2% of world assets. It's less than 0.5% of investable universe of assets out there. It's under 2% of total US equities or global family office wealth. And it's maybe, you know, circa 5 to 7% of gold value, right? And the context here is obviously to give you an understanding or an idea of still how early it is, despite the crazy astronomical growth that we've seen in a very, very young space, so to speak. Some other numbers that I think are key to keep in mind, and one thing that I'd like everyone to remember is the number 15. Why is that important? 15% is the CAGR, which stands for compound annual growth rate of the G4 central bank balance sheets since the GFC. So to put it differently, since the GFC, central banks, basically globally, have been printing money and expanding their balance sheets, right? So what that means is the level and supply of fiat going into the system globally has on average been increasing by 15%. Now, what it actually means is that's your hurdle rate every year. If you're returning assets, and whether it's a business, whether it's in the stock market or currency market or bonds, whatever you're trading, if you're doing less than 15%, you are actually underperforming the fiat supply that's coming in. Why is that key? That's key because that's hugely inflationary. And if you pull any asset, major asset, and you go back since the GFC, you measure it to now, you'll find that almost every asset underperforms except for one, and that's crypto, right? Just top of mind, if you think about going back to GFC, S&P, vastly underperforming, right? Bonds, naturally so. Commodities, naturally so. The NASDAQ is right on the 15% hurdle on a CAGR. And if you find individual tech stocks, then they are also, you can find something like an Amazon that's done 30% since, the GFC, but those are the exceptions, right? Whereas when you have something like Bitcoin, it's done upwards of 3 digits, 250% and up. So the point here is you also, for the first time, have the availability of an asset class that is deflationary. In the case of Bitcoin, and that's definitely not the truth for all tokens, we know by the code, and code is law, that there'll be 21 million in supply. And we also know that probably 4 million keys, roughly that, have been lost. So actually the total real supply eventually will be something kind of closer to 17 million. And for all of you gold bugs out there, and it's not to say you can only have one or the other, but even gold is always increasing by supply by kind of 2%. So this is kind of meta frame to think about, and maybe how to think of it from a numbers perspective. It's a deflationary asset. It's still tiny in regards to overall allocation globally from a financial value kind of perspective. And Bitcoin, at least from my viewpoint, there's a lot of crypto tokens that will do very many different things, but Bitcoin, I think, is first and foremost in the store of value kind of camp. So point number 2, a little bit shorter, think about global population. It's about 8 billion people today, right? You think about cell phone users, about 4 billion smart cell phones, right? You think about internet users, it's close to 5 billion, right? And you think about blockchain wallets, only 70 million. So this is basically telling you in regards to the penetration, we barely done 2%, in context to people who are on cell phones and people who are, using kind of the internet. It's still the early kind of inception kind of phase. People who are technologists and go back, and it'll be interesting to hear, Jorge's point on this later, think that if you look at the internet, we're basically still in 96, 97. That's kind of how early we are from a contextual kind of perspective, right? And if you look also on the globe, the unbanked adults globally is 2.5 billion people who don't play in the centralized system, who don't have a bank account, who don't have an ID, who can't get a loan, who don't have a credit card, right? Things that people in Singapore, Dubai, Toronto, and all the developed markets completely take for granted. So hard to put a value on that, but if you think the cost for a person a year from financials is $1,000, you already get into the $1 trillion mark. And just the last point on my side, which is point number 3, the big difference, obviously, since 2017 to 2021 is the institutionalization, governmentization, regulation coming in. We've seen the likes of PayPal, the likes of Square, people who are in the payments side. We've seen corporate treasuries looking to diversify their balance sheet into a decentralized kind of asset. We've seen, obviously, a lot of the hedge fund kind of pioneers. And now we've even seen governments looking to put Bitcoin as legal kind of tender. So I think these are just some key meta kind of frameworks that, I'd love to just leave the audience to kind of take away from. And I'm sure we'll be able to also delve into all the pros and cons alongside that later, Tarek. Thank you.
Okay, fascinating. Some very, very interesting numbers there and great context and perspective. And I think a lot of people out there, including myself, are very surprised at some of the numbers. Khurram, may I take it to you from this context, please? And as an investor, somebody who has been a very early mover in this business, you were a great believer, from like 2010. You even won a prize in the banking and financial world related to this. So can you give us a little bit about who you are and your context, a simple, short 2-3 minute monologue for us to get a feel of who you are and what it is?
Sure. Thank you, Tarek, and thank you, Kay. It's going to be hard talking after Kay. We've been following Kay for some time, and he's a wealth of knowledge and much respect to you, and much respect to the entire country of Singapore leading the helm of cryptocurrency globally. Just to recap, my name is Khurram Shroff. I recently became chair of iMining, and our symbol on the Toronto Stock Exchange is IMIN. And we are a blockchain and cryptocurrency investment company publicly traded on the stock market. And these figures is very interesting because even though our crypto market is worth $1.5 trillion as per coin market cap. The volume or the trading volume we have seen increase over the last few months and have reached over up to $1.2 trillion in a 24-hour period. So which is astronomical. If you look at it, like the stock market is, let's say, worth 100 trillion or 50 trillion. 100 trillion stock market doesn't rotate $50 trillion a day. So the volume and the growth and the volatility of crypto is exponential compared to any other. And it's so interesting because we are sort of a bridge between the crypto markets and the public market, because we are regulated, we have oversight by the regulators and the different government bodies. So we have to report multiple things that the business does through the life process. And it's interesting to explain to the regulators on what is proof of work, what is proof of stake, how is Bitcoin different, and Ethereum, and the inflationary economics behind it, the legalities behind it. And we have seen in the last 6 months, it's sort of getting more institutionalized, right? And one of the big elephants in the room right now is Elon Musk and what is happening with this Bitcoin Council. And I guess a lot of people cannot speak about it, but we have been very closely involved in it because all the people on the Bitcoin Council are our friends and our investment companies such as Hut 8, Hive, Argo Blockchain, iMining. And but now with the latest message, we are double thinking the intention of the wealthiest man on the planet with the cryptocurrency industry. And the Bitcoin mining community is really being not shortchanged, but being slapped around globally by governments and this aspect of green climate issues that Bitcoin is causing. But it's so interesting to see that there's so many other aspects of human society that needs to get fixed before we even care about Bitcoin, because it's so negligible. Bitcoin has been so volatile that it has really shown the flaws of different societies and different governments and different mindsets. And, I go back to what our friend CZ or Binance said, Bitcoin is a concept. We're not a corporation. We're not a company. It's a concept in which now, as with 70, 80 million wallets, but at least 500 million people or more understand or know that concept in their brain. So it's going to be very hard for any government in the world to clamp down against it unless they go with these wallets and, you cannot keep it off these centralized exchanges, etc. So it's a very interesting time. And we find ourselves in the middle of the fire in sort of North America, talking to the regulators in both Canada and the United States, and explaining and being more forthcoming on the way crypto can be institutionalized. Canada has led the world in crypto, I believe. Majority of the people who are leading the crypto world are Canadians. And the other thing is we had the first Bitcoin fund listed on any sort of credible exchange of the G7 in Canada. We had the first Bitcoin ETF listed in Canada. And Canada, the regulators, the bankers are even working together with all the major universities to create a central bank currency called Project X, right? And it's so interesting, going back to Kay's point on what is money, and how are people taking in money. And I was really impressed by one of these analysts who gave us an example of this big rock with a big hole in it, which exists on the Pacific Yap Island. Till the 1960s, it was used as a hold of value or hold of money. So they've got a big rock somewhere in the forest, and the whole community of this island believes that that rock has value. So, and now they have like hafiz in Islamic culture, where you memorize the whole Quran, or you memorize the whole Hijrah, or you memorize the whole thing. So there are guys who memorize the whole sort of blockchain, and they know exactly what percentage of the rock is owned by which member of the community, and they just keep on shifting what the percentages of the rock that specific people own, while that rock stays in that same forest, cannot be moved. So it's a very interesting aspect of how I was laughing with him, and I said, this is exactly what blockchain is, because I don't think anyone's seen a Bitcoin. It's everyone believes that there's a Bitcoin, and we all are transacting part of it or full of it. In terms of what's happening in the investment realm, we've lost our shirt. I mean, we've invested in over 4,000 crypto projects a few years ago. We were very lucky to mine a lot of Bitcoin when it was much easier to mine. And we went in this concept of investing in different companies. But what we realized in these different tokens, but what we realized is that we lost our shirt, and a lot of them were scams and, etc. And we were really, we were analyzing them, but, it was just not the right time. And now we are more investing in public market structures. We believe if we invest in companies which have oversight, invest in companies which are publicly traded, we have a better chance for institutionalizing the economy, institutionalizing the crypto world, and bringing it, making it matter. Until now, it hasn't mattered. And now we have to make it matter, even though we are 1 or 2% of the public markets. The whole crypto industry is 1 or 2% of the entire public market. The public markets are growing at an exponential rate. I mean, there are 700,000 public companies now globally, and within the next year, they're projecting a million. So you're talking about a 30% increase in public companies on a global level. According to our figures, personal figures, no, not from anyone else, we think it's going to double. The amount of volume of capital out there, we believe the public companies are going to go from 700,000 total to about 1.2 million. So now you got this plethora of capital market, which is going to double in size, or at least increase in size by 50%. So we believe crypto market could easily double or triple in size. So, so these are the comparable statistics or thoughts that we have. But we are trying to bridge the gap between the crypto, private, young, scared people globally to a corporate, influential, successful, innovative company which is leading the space with in terms of with the regulators and the legal community.
Great. Khurram, thank you very much. I wanted you to keep talking, because I think you're giving us some interesting perspective and nuggets. But after the introductions, when I finish with George, we'll make it much more rapid in terms of the Q&A and the conversation. And I would also encourage the speakers, the panelists, between themselves, like a roundtable, to ask each other things. So we would welcome any of that. We have a lot of comments and questions coming in, and I'll get to that in a second, and a lot of polls to follow. But before that, George, thank you for being so patient and very kind, and to have joined us at this time. And we basically bow down to you as the most influential person in crypto and blockchain in the country. I did vote for you, by the way. Yeah, we're all going down. So tell us about you, how you became the most influential person. But jokes aside, tell us about yourself a little bit, George, and your perspective. And you are one of the thought leaders on DeFi.
I don't know how I got involved in that, because it was actually a surprise when somebody called me and said, "Oh, you're running for this." I said, "Excuse me." So it was as a surprise for me, I think, as many of you, but it's been an interesting ride. I've been in the Middle East, I guess, for about 25 plus years, but originally from Portugal, spent a good time in Canada. So I have kind of, you can say, a global perspective. I visit about 60 different countries, so far 65. So I kind of look at things from maybe a slightly different perspective. I look at it from a technology perspective and from a utility perspective, meaning what is the problem that we're trying to solve. And definitely what I've seen, the evolution over the last 10 plus years and the spectacles more recently about Elon Musk, or even to some extent about Bitcoin Miami, which I think is going to have enough memes probably for the next year or so. What we realize is that this technology is new, but it is by itself already created tremendous value. And I like to put the value that goes beyond just the cryptocurrencies and the coins, etc. I really talk about enterprise blockchain. And I think the combination of the two is really what is going to create a lot of force in shaping the new economies that we're trying to create by saving substantial operation value, by creating new value, and by enabling entrepreneurs to create new solutions. Now, I do believe that technology is still at its early stages, and I think the big movements that we definitely see in price, the amount of scams, the volatility, kind of highlights that, because when markets tend to be very volatile, that it indicates that there's some systemic problems. If something like a tweet is enough to cause a 15+% variation on a market, I think something is a little bit wrong with that market, or people are extremely highly influenced, or people are over leveraging and therefore are extremely exposed to any kind of mal-weather conditions. All that given, I've been involved in a little bit over 40 different blockchain and crypto projects. And I do believe that my summary of this involvement really sees a few things and a few elements that I consider to be important in the upcoming growth and success. So I do believe that we're still doing the baby steps. We still maybe 10x to 50x, even 100 or 1000x to any kind of returns or results. However, many elements remain. One I think is key is definitely the education. Yes, we have institutional investors that have dropped into the fray and are kind of becoming part of the ecosystem, but definitely the average user still has no clue or very little clue of exactly what's going on. So we need to give them the necessary skills to be able to understand. That does not mean they need necessarily to be experts about blockchain, but they need to at least understand the value it brings and how it can contribute to their daily lives. The second element that I think is extremely important in blockchain and crypto and the entire space is the building of community. And what I mean by community, it's not just necessarily something that has become sometimes synonymous a bit with Bitcoin, which I call toxic community. So that means either we do as we told you to do, otherwise it's not good. I do believe very much we're a community which is a little bit more, you can say, inclusive, in the sense that the people that come to that community have a chance to voice what is the usability they want to make with this technology, not being imposed on them as this is the way you eat for breakfast or otherwise. And the last element that I think is extremely important is, rather than to focus on the growth of the coins, which I think is a tactical mistake on this crypto and blockchain, we should focus on the usability and the use cases. The use cases will drive the value, not the other way around. So it's not because they're speculative, it's not because there's scarcity that value automatically gets created out of thin air. It's when people use something, they have credibility in what's being done, and the more usage factors that they have that contribute to changing their daily lives, then the natural growth will just happen. Nothing needs to be done. It will just happen because of that usability. So I get back to you, Tarek, and then it's my pleasure to be here amongst such esteemed colleagues, both from Singapore and from Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, George. I think the context that the three of you have put together, it's a really nice mesh of exactly where we are. From the big elephant in the room, Elon Musk, we'll be talking about the big gorilla in the room, which is the central bank, and what they are doing in the central banks, rather, because all of them are there as part of that. What I'm going to do to throw in a little bit more fun into this conversation is to do a few polls and to get a little dipstick test of where people actually are. Do they actually understand what the hell we're talking about? Because we're throwing so much jargon out there. It's a new ecosystem. And so let's throw out a couple of polls. All right. So the first one is to understand what is crypto, and do an evaluation and assessment of it. Oops, sorry, I beg your pardon. I'm glad I didn't launch that. There we go. Now, the first one is about Bitcoin. A simple question. Do you consider Bitcoin a currency, stored value, or just a speculative asset? And the panelists are also allowed to vote. So, folks, if you can just quickly vote on that, and then we'll see where it is. Because this could actually start building some context in terms of what we're doing. So while we're doing this, and we don't want to influence the people out there, one of the key things around Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining as a social aspect has also become the use of energy. And apparently the total Bitcoin, the energy that is used to mine Bitcoin right now is as much energy as Argentina, apparently. So I can't get my head around that. Somehow, that's a lot of electricity because Argentina is a big country. So perhaps you as a techie, George, will be able to give us some advice in terms of what that is. Okay, so we will end the polling and I'm going to publish the results. We'll do 2 or 3 questions just to get a little feel. So the first question here, and I can share the results, and the results are that it is a speculative asset. That got 36%, 11% only see it as a currency, and store value, 23%. Really? I wonder how we can do that. So, and the last one is a hybrid at 28%. So between a speculative asset and a hybrid is the first feature. Would you like to comment on this, folks?
You know, it's sort of morphed. And what George was mentioning, education is key, right? And this poll is very interesting to see because it is evolving. When Satoshi's white paper came up, and I think everyone should read the white paper of Bitcoin. That's the first thing everyone should do. It's an 8-page white paper. And what the heading of the white paper is electronic cash. So it moved from a usable perspective or concept of being able to transfer electronic cash to something that cannot be transferred so easily. It is so cumbersome, it is so expensive, etc. So it became sort of a store of value, right? And now from a store of value, it still doesn't have usability. And usability has come into other blockchains such as Ethereum and stuff like that. And Bitcoin is really just a use of store of value currently. Now governments are using it as in sort of an asset on their balance sheet. And a lot of public companies in North America have started to buy Bitcoin as part of their balance sheet, right? Including us. And which is going to open a plethora of public companies willing to hold part of their balance sheet in crypto, and mainly it's going to be Bitcoin. And so I believe there's going to be a huge influx of public companies putting a small amount of Bitcoin on their balance sheet.
Okay, let me ask, do another couple of polls and then get comments from you, George and Kay. So would you feel comfortable if your country adopted Bitcoin as its reserve currency? Apparently, El Salvador is about to do that. So the options for you are hell yes, hell yeah, hell no. I think ETC or another makes much more sense than Bitcoin, or not sure. You'll enjoy this one, Khurram, because you've got ETC in there. Okay, so hell no is winning at this point in time, and I shall give it another 10 seconds or so, and then we'll get onto that. But it still seems that hell. I mean, there are 15 people who are saying hell yeah. That's a very, very interesting data point, and I'll just share the results with you. Okay, can 15% of the people go out there saying that it is? It should become a reserve currency. Is this real?
So, listen, I mean, it's obviously a question that's supposed to make you kind of jump a little bit out of your seat, right?
Yes.
But, you know, you have to understand, and I'm sure George and Khurram are the same. You know, this was stuff we're talking about in 2017, right? And the whole idea was basically saying, listen, it's not about being a maximalist. It's not about saying fiat is going to zero and everything's going to fiat, to crypto, right? That's not what I'm trying to say, right? But what I was basically advocating is it's only a question of time before we have sovereign wealth going in, central banks going in, family office balance sheets going in, and also governments going in, right? Because it's very easy to sit in a place like Dubai, Singapore, Toronto, which, you know, it's a relative world. These are amazing places, right? And I'm sure a lot of the people who are joining us are probably also sitting in some amazing places where, you know, through a lot of circumstances, we're actually predominantly just lucky to be, right? But for the rest of the world, it's a very different case. You know, if you've been in Venezuela or Zimbabwe, you know, the volatility in crypto is nothing. It's nothing. What? It only went down 80%. Amazing, you know? So the point here is it's only a question of time before it's adopted. And yes, we know we have El Salvador, and yes, there's a lot of disputes around the president and the regime, but that's besides the point, right? It's not about a nation that has 25 billion of economy and only 7 million people. That's not the point. The point is this is where we're going, right? Is, as I said, 15% is a compound annual growth rate of central banks growing their balance sheet, right? And just to give people context who maybe are not in finance or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
but is this quantitative easing and simply printing money, or is that the because
that's what it is. That's all it is. It's like stealth financial repression. That's what it is. If everyone here in this webinar that we're having, let's assume we're all on an island, you know, let's call it exponential, the exponential island, right? And there's 1 million, you know, dollars in circulation in exponential, right? Closed economy, right? And there's only one cup on the island, and the price of the cup is $10. Now we go from 1 million to 10 million in circulation, right? That price of cup can't stay at the same 10 bucks, right? So this is what's happening globally. You can't see it, but it's actually what's happening, right? And you're talking about, if you go back to 2007, you know, $1 million and then compounded by 15% CAGR 14 years later, you're talking about something that's over $7 million, right? So I'm not trying to say it should be Bitcoin. That's not the point. But the point is there's a case to be made of governments not necessarily wholly 100% adopting, but at least entertaining the fact, let's have a decentralized asset where the denominator does not move, where the supply cannot be fudged with. That's what I'm trying to say. And I think it makes the whole ecosystem better.
Cool. One more poll, and then we'll go to George with that poll.
Tariq, just to add to that, it's so interesting because what Kay mentioned, because you know, this is what is sort of needed. We are not looking for something like El Salvador. You know, we're looking for something like, you know, Dubai or Canada or the US, in which the regulators, or Singapore, where the regulators are entertaining possibility of public companies holding, you know, crypto in their balance sheet, and governments holding. So it is, it's not a one way or another. It needs to be sort of like a very a slow movement to the regulators, because the regulators don't, or even the bankers don't lead with innovation. It was very interesting. I was speaking with the CEO of a sizable financial institution in the United States. So, and I was telling him, why aren't you helping the crypto space? Why aren't you leading the crypto space? You're such an important financial institution in the United States. And the CEO told me, Khurram, we don't lead with innovation. We let the big banks take all their hits and everything, and then in the end we will if we are arm twisted, we will get into it. So it's very different, the mindset of the bankers, because they will not get into it until the government basically entertains it and sort of nudges them to get into. So it's a very interesting dynamic on how bankers perceive crypto. And even though they might do it personally, they're not going to do it on a corporate or institution level unless the government sort of nudges them.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So I've shared the results on this one, and now let me look at one more, and then we'll take it from there. So the idea now is, stop sharing, and the third question that I'd like to ask is the future of finance and decentralization of that. Is the future of finance decentralized? And we launched this polling, yes, no, or maybe. And this really will open up the question both to George and Kay, and really, what is the role of centralized banks in the future? By definition, it's an oxymoron that a central bank will decentralize. I mean, that's why they're called central banks. They're not called decentral banks. So I think we need to be careful about where we go with that. So 58% of them are saying yes, the future is decentralized. 23% no, and 20% maybe. So it's actually a pretty even mix. I'm surprised at that. Kay and George, perhaps you haven't spoken for a while. Would you like to comment on that? Are we looking at a decentralized world? And then Kay, you can dive in with a quick comment.
Well, I think first, the world is centralized primarily today, but I think there's a move towards decentralization. I've been in IT for 35 years. And over these 35 years, there has always been a movement between centralization and decentralization of IT itself. So it's the same thing, quite natural, that is happening to the financial systems as well. So definitely, I do believe that the future is more decentralized than it is today. That does not mean it will necessarily be 100% decentralized. With the advent of, you can say, blockchain 2.0, we had the birth of what we call smart contracts. Smart contracts, which are actually not smart, and they are not 100% contracts by themselves, but let's say they're pieces of code that actually execute in the blockchain cloud or in the blockchain node environment, which really means that instead of being centralizedly executed, they're decentralized executed, which means they allow you to create a whole new generation of applications. Some of them are financial applications for purchasing and inventory control and all that. But there's a lot of applications in finance. So that really means that you're starting the birth of a whole new generation of financial institutions, what we sometimes even call neobanks or virtual banks. That means these are banks that don't have any bricks and mortar. That means they don't have offices. That means they execute purely within the blockchain space. The big advantage of having these centralized entities is that they operate very dynamically. They're based on the rules that are defined in the smart contracts. So that means the same rules actually apply to each other or to everyone. They have the capability of being audited and validated by third parties. All the transactions that they do are transparent, which is not necessarily the case in financial or banking systems today. Many things occur behind the scenes, and you'll never be privy to actually what is happening. And even, I think, more important than that, it allows you to create a more cost-effective, inclusive system. Now, does it mean it solves all the problems? The answer is no. because when we move towards decentralization, and especially the world of DeFi, many other issues come into play that have only partially been solved today. One example is KYC, or know your own customer. People want to know what is this individual, what is his address, and this is not necessarily something
I thought KYC, George, I thought KYC was kill your customer with too much information requirement and too much paperwork.
Well, yeah, a lot of paperwork, correct. Actually, exactly. And anti-money laundering as well, which means governments want to know what is the source of funds and many elements of such. So that really means you need to have a balanced approach towards decentralization and some elements of centralization to actually achieve a system that, to some extent, services the citizens of the various countries, serves the requirements of the central bank, as well as it introduces inclusivity to people that normally have been left out of the system. And that really means that you can potentially have an incremental KYC, meaning that, okay, if you're going to do something that is $5, $10, $50, $100, just your name is good enough. If, however, you go from 100 to 500, maybe we need your ID, or if you need more, 100,000, maybe we need your physical location or the location of the business.
Yeah.
And I think what this allows us to do is to create a whole generation of systems that are fit for purpose and have the necessary rules in place, instead of the anarchy that some people are actually proclaiming as the future. So I think we have to have this balance between flexibility and usability to achieve. It is the same when we talk about security, because security is always a balance. It's a balance between protection and usability. If we have too much protection, you cannot do anything. If you have too much usability, you have too much freedom, and that's not good. So the reality stays somewhere in between. And if we achieve that balance in this new DeFi world or virtual neobanks, I think this will establish a whole new generation of institutions that are much more cost effective in the delivery of these services, much more accelerated, and therefore can be affordable by everybody. Because, for example, if we look at things like, example would be microloans. There's a very interesting system that has been launched in Pakistan quite a few years ago that only loans $100 to a citizen, and based on Islamic principles. The nice thing about this system was that, known as Akawat, it has a recovery rate of 99.99%. That really means it has been a successful system. That means these microloans have helped things like laborers, people that require small amounts of money to buy the right machinery or the right tools. Maybe they're farmers, they need the right tool to be able to do their job, or the right ingredients to put on the ground.
Yeah.
Means they made enough to pay back the loan that was given to them with the 99.99%. We don't have such success rates in traditional banks, nor in the credit card system, where defaults lie somewhere between 10 to 15%.
Right. Okay, I'd like to ask a related question to this in terms of decentralization versus centralization, with the context that when we look at blockchain and we're looking at currencies which are global in nature, as an intrinsic element on the one hand, but what about countries, because they are the verticals in the middle, and they're making rules. Their central bank is making rules. They have their own compliance and political issues. So basically we cannot cross borders so easily. So how can countries have a tax system? How can countries manage their pension funds? Because suddenly everything becomes horizontal and global in nature, and everything starts just basically the house of cards starts crumbling unless there's something that is holding it together. What are your thoughts on that? Because whenever I think about it, I'm an economist myself, I am finding it very difficult to get my head around.
Well, I'm not an economist, so okay. I got to tip my hat off to you for nailing that. I think, the way you phrase the question, it reminds me again of like a maximalist view. And I'm not saying that was your intent, but that's kind of what we run into, unfortunately, in crypto, again, like any young industry, any young asset class, it has its absolute advocates. You have Bitcoin people who will not speak to Ethereum people, right? And, we can name 20, 30, 50, 100 tokens here, but actually it's really all at the end of the day about decentralization versus what has been a centralized way of how we've been living pretty much as far back as we can tell and know, right? So, to me, the expression, the future is here, it's just unevenly distributed, really, really rings true for crypto, right? And there's stuff, and I'm seeing some of the questions kind of come through, like, a currency that's decentralized, a disaster. How can you peg to BTC? Question mark, question. And listen, I get it, man. I was the loony guy in the corner, man. This is not my first rodeo, right? And from my perspective, it's not to convince any of the people here. It's just to say how I think about it. For I think all intents and purposes, I have the humility of knowing that, okay, maybe we're dead wrong about this. I don't think so, right? So I think to your point, there'll be different roles to be played, right? Depending on where you are in the world, the EM development versus the DM development will be very different. As Khurram was saying, the Singapore space in crypto is deep. It's got some of the smartest people in the business in the world in crypto based out here. The government has been very, very kind of supportive. And it's a little bit of a paradox because, Singapore is obviously a very developed nation, right? So you wonder, why is that different from kind of New York? And I just think it's a function of many different things, but it's not about one being 0 and the other one being 100. Like, I think this is something that people miss. At the end of the day, the way I sum it up is, what's decentralization? Decentralization is less friction. It's a move towards things being seamless, right? You have to take a step back and say, why is the world we're living in, the default understanding for most of us, being centralized? It's because we've always needed a third party to check, to verify for security. Now, all of a sudden, what blockchain allows us is I can go into a contract with anyone here, we put it through a token, and I don't need a lawyer, I don't need an accountant, I don't need anyone else to verify. It'll execute automatically and it's done. So think about, for people who are in different businesses, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's marketing, whether it's retail, think about all the parts of your business where you have to pay costs to just check, to monitor, to track, to secure, right? All that slippage. Yeah. Decentralization gets rid of that. The bankers, like, dead, right? Accountants, dead, right? Generally speaking. I'm not trying to say they're going to 0, but there's a huge part of that that's a cost that can be taken out with decentralization. So, that question that you put up was a great question. I cannot see a world where we don't go, because decentralization is technological innovation. It's just continuing. Web 3.0 and so on and so forth, right?
So before I go to my next question, what I'm now sort of stepping back and looking at the existing infrastructure globally, post the Second World War, we had the Bretton Woods session, and basically all of the World Bank, the IMF, the United Nations, and all of those people, those organizations and institutions came out, and they were designed for a different time, a different world, and they were designed essentially to manage a post-war era. And for the next 50, 60, 70 years, the only thing that was being seen was being measured against the thermometer of the financial success and outcomes. And now a little bit of that is tipping post-COVID also in terms of how the disparity of income and all of those components are coming in. So with that context in mind, the World Bank, the IMF, all of these people, they're just not geared to look at the world in a context at a global level and do that decentralization process on the one hand. So I'll throw a little ball in the air, and everybody should sort of come in, and including the audience, and they are sending us a lot of chat, which is amazing. Is is it the World Economic Forum or something like that more relevant, where there are business leaders and economic and financial leaders, and it's not a government and it's not imposed like that? Or is it a World Bank that's going to help us to make peace and pull all of this thing together in some sensible way? George, Khurram, I'm sure you have a view on that.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a real live example of someone in my house. We are a family office based on real estate. We own a bank in Kenya, and we're the world's largest book publishers out of India. So now I had a very hard time convincing our elders to give me, $10 million. And because I was going to take that 10 million and invest it in Ethereum. And anyway, long story short, I had to give like months of, not months, like weeks of time and like hours of my time trying to convince our elder generation and explaining to them. But when I said, okay, I'm investing in these public companies, such as Coinbase or Hut 8 or Hive and anyone like that, I asked for $10 million and I got it in 5 minutes. So it was so interesting to see, even within our thing, in which I could have made 10 times more money by investing in crypto, but family offices, even within our families, are have an issue investing directly in crypto because they don't know what's going to happen, how it's going to happen. So it is more likely and accessible if we are structured as a public company. I believe if we structure ourselves as a centralized public company, we oversight, then we can go and really empower the world of DeFi. So we have to first assemble ourselves as centralized, then we can empower DeFi, because the other centralized entities cannot, because they don't have that ambition or innovation to do that. If we have it, we have to centralize first and then decentralize.
I understand, but I will challenge you on that for a minute, because going back into a public structure in a stock market and public environment, that's designed for a different reality. That's designed for a different dynamic. So if we're using an old dynamic for a new element that's coming in, I think that is quite dangerous, because one of the questions I wanted to ask the entire panel even earlier on, and much later, was that what are the things, and Kay, you will love this, and also George, what are the things we need to unlearn? Because we need to learn a lot of new stuff, the whole new ecosystem. But what are the 2, 3, 4 things we need to unlearn before we can move forward? Because there are some new realities. So what is our unlearning exercise, Kay? Quick comment on that.
Well, dude, I feel like you're setting me up. I had like a whole different tangent to add. So sorry about that, Tarek. Didn't mean to leave you kind of. No, I was really resonating with what Khurram says. Like, I get both of what you're saying, right?
All right.
But let me give you an analogy, and we'll bring it back to crypto, right?
Sure.
So I'm a LP investor, and I'm an advisor at something that's called SoGal Ventures. It's a VC fund, focuses on financing female entrepreneurs, right? And minorities. And the catch here being, out of all the venture capital in the world, barely 2% goes to female entrepreneurs. And everyone who knows their numbers knows that actual global population, over 50% is female, right? And we all have kick-ass mothers, wives, sisters, girlfriends. So it's kind of weird that when it comes to entrepreneurship, right, and funding women with companies, that for some reason they get 2%. So what's the problem here, right? The problem is the incumbency. The problem is that Silicon Valley is whatever, 95, 98% male, sure, 70% white, 20% Asian, so on and so forth, right? But to Khurram's point, use the problem for the solution. Yes, you can turn and you can only raise from women and, forget the men and all of that. And it's not to say that will not work, but, part of the structural issue is a lot of people in a centralized world from centralized places, they don't realize the ripple effects of the issues that they've been causing. They can't see it themselves, right? And guess where all the money is? It's on that side. So, you know, it's much more scalable in regards to how much money you can get, how quickly you can get it, and so on. But you're right in the sense of there's also forces on the centralized side who want to keep, you know, entrenched, right? Who want to keep the interest. And we also know in crypto, and we also know in DeFi, there's a lot of people who are saying they're decentralized, but they're really not, right? Yeah. They're just like sugarcoating the whole experience, right?
Yeah. It's amazing. A lot of comments are coming in, and you guys, you folks can read the comments. So I think I won't go to that. But there are up to 15 questions from the audience also that's there. So we're going to spend about 10 minutes and do some rapid fire responses to those questions. But before we go there, let's just do one more poll, and that's a fun thing because we need to understand how many people actually understand stuff. And that is NFT. Poll number 7 is on NFT, and he says NFT, and we've given you a hint: non-fungible tokens, fad or future. So you guys tell us what it is, and it's a fad or a future. And then we'll ask George what NFT is, because he is actually involved in some of that, and how can it be used, or is it just, you know, I actually saw that there was a painting recently, and I can't remember who the artist was, where as an NFT, where they created a digital painting of it, had a greater value than the original painting. So it's just sort of a little bit weird, but that's where we are. Okay, cool. So we end the polling, and 46% of the people feel it's the future, no opinion, not sure, and 15% at least of being honest. What the hell is NFT? So it's new futuristic transactions. No, non-fungible tangible assets, tokens rather. So George, you're the NFT guy. Tell us, please.
Well, a few important aspects. As we know now, NFT stands for non-fungible token, and actually there is various types. There's the ones where you cannot break the fungible token into subparts, and there's one where you can actually do a tokenization of that non-fungible token. But primarily, let's first talk about the future. The future is coming, but it's still not here today. If we look specifically at numbers, the values of non-fungible tokens, we saw, for example, Bitcoin collapsed 15, 20%. Guess what? Non-fungible tokens collapsed 90%. That really is an interesting number, because it really means that non-fungible tokens are still more speculative. Non-fungible tokens require still a lot of advancement in usability. And I'm not talking about just non-fungible tokens just for art. First, non-fungible tokens has got 4 or 5 usabilities, primary ones. One is obviously art or content, whether it happens to be video, or whether it happens to be audio or digital art. However, non-fungible tokens can also be used as identity, and non-fungible tokens can also be used as, for example, like a serial number to, let's say, luxury item. Non-fungible tokens could be a serial number to a diamond or some other piece of that is extremely rare. So the next thing that I think is very important about non-fungible tokens is that the technology to use non-fungible tokens, to build use cases, is still evolving. So let's take an example of this technology. Today we have something like YouTube or Facebook, in which artistic content gets presented to us. And the people that are making money through this artistic content is via ads. And these ads are controlled either by Facebook or by, in this case, Google.
Google, yeah.
The artists only get a very small returns of that potential return.
Yeah.
If we take the real new forms, and one example is one I sometimes use called Rocky.io, and you can look it up online, is an example of a non-fungible token place in which there is a player, where it really means that the content gets played through that platform. So the non-fungible token is driven by a smart contract, which really means that the creator of that token or the artist or the person that has the content gets rewarded either each time the token gets passed from one user to the other, bought or sold, or actually every time the content gets played. So in this case, Rocky.io is for DJs. So DJs create interesting content. So anytime their content gets played, like the same way it gets done in Spotify or YouTube, they would get a small return for that. So that means it's not just about introducing the non-fungible token. We have to introduce the use case and the technology that enables that non-fungible token to actually return the potential value that it can to its users. And that's what I mean by we're still in the early steps. When those systems give birth through marketplaces and others, then we'll see a much bigger value creation being done out of non-fungible tokens through hundreds of use cases. But we're still doing these baby steps as we speak today.
I guess the market is in its infancy, and some of the comments coming through actually in the chat actually is even suggesting that. So, we're not looking for conclusions. We're just looking to explore this, all of these aspects. You mentioned the big. Sorry, you want to say something?
Yeah, Tariq, I just wanted to add another thing about non-fungible tokens is because, you know, again, the biggest non-fungible token success has been out of Canada called the Dapper Lab, which launched NBA Top Shots. And and we understand what has happened. So, and with what Meta Coven out of Singapore buying Beeple's painting for $69 million. And this whole concept of metaverses, which have started, which are these digital worlds. And it's so interesting because when you talk to kids, and not kids, I mean, I'm talking about 18-year-olds, you know, and they have this whole nother aspect of NFTs. And it is just uniquely that we are positioned that we just bought some CryptoPunks and we're the top accounts on CryptoKitties. We invested across the NFT space. And we believe that NFT has a massive future because the usability and the adoptability of it is much easier than crypto because it has something backing it up or something that you can say that, look at this, right? And also the amount of money. Now you can buy an NFT for $50, $100, and you're getting a whole thing, right? But if you're gonna try to buy a whole Bitcoin, it's gonna be like a lot of money. So people in their mind want a whole thing. And that is, I think, is going to, if we as a global world of crypto, we can really lead with NFTs, which will create a bigger adoption as we feel. And also, there's a lot of things that our financial guys are looking at because art is one of the biggest, a very big investment class, and which is all getting disrupted. Which Tariq was talking about. He was talking about a Banksy painting. So a gentleman bought a Banksy painting for, I think, $160,000 and then burnt it and sold the NFT of that painting for $350,000. So it showed the concept that if you migrate an asset from a physical world to a digital world, it could, in essence, increase in value. One of the interesting discussions we had with all these big NFT guys a few months ago was the fact that where will these NFTs end up? So these NFTs will end up in this whole new digital world, which is going to be powered by VR and where people are going to live in this digital world more so than in the real world. For example, there was a digital house out of Toronto sold by a friend of ours, Kim, called the Mars House. And it is basically a 3D rendering of a digital house, which could be possibly made on Mars, right? And that digital house sold for $500,000. So now we are seeing, or the world is seeing, different ways NFTs are being presented. And I feel NFT is a beautiful way for the crypto industry to lead with adoption to help artists globally?
Thank you for that. I think one of the chat comments basically was saying, how on earth can you burn a painting and have it worth more? So I think we're still trying to grapple with that and get our heads around all of these things. So on that note of fun, let's talk about the elephant in the room that you spoke about earlier, and that is Elon Musk. He is an amazing storyteller. Apart from doing his business, whatever he's doing there, but as a storyteller and as a market influencer now, this is getting very, very awkward, and it's almost sort of getting difficult to try and how can you regulate that? So the anonymous hackers are coming in and threatening him that we will start taking our revenge on you. So this whole emoji revolution with a broken heart, taking value from the stock market, and then, so what about if 10 emojis happen there over a period of time, will the market collapse? Hey, you're the market guy. Tell us, are we living in the world of broken heart emojis? And what the hell, how do you trade and how do you advise people?
I think you forgot the cum rocket went up 700%. So that small detail, just to creatively put.
Yeah. So Kay, how do you manage these kinds of folks like Musk, who's is playing? I mean, he's got more money than God. I mean, so the guy just doesn't know what to do with himself. So he fools around. And I'm serious. What do we do? How can we trade in this world where things are so volatile and just one guy and one broken emoji changes the world?
Yeah. So a few thoughts, right? First of all, and I appreciate there's a lot of people who just got on because they want to Lambo to the moon and they want to retire by the end of next week, maybe even this week. And you know, that's all fine and well, but don't mistake the price action in the space for success or failure, right? The most, you know, the price in crypto, as crazy as has been, and I'm a benefit from it. My family's benefit from it, as I'm sure everyone else is on the panel, as I'm sure a lot of our participants are. It's been one of my best investments. Don't mistake that for success. The most interesting thing is actually what's happening in the ecosystem, what's happening in the underlying technologies. You know, disruption is not even the right word. It's more like evolution. As I said, it's taking out the friction in the system. It's changing the whole paradigm for there. I think the space is bigger than any one person. I think the space is bigger than any one government. I think the space is bigger than any collective bunch of individuals and governments. It's not to say that the price cannot be hurt, because obviously it can, right? But you know, it's not too different from a very well-known hedge fund manager, he or she going out and talking their book and saying they're long this stock or they short this stock, and then you see the automatic kind of price reaction, right? So that is also shows you how, you know, as I think George was also pointing out earlier, how still early we are, right? There's definitely things and tokens, as we said, there's over 10,000. A lot of them, you know, Khurram has been in on early on. There's a proper team, there's a process, you know, there's experience, and there's other stuff that's absolute fluff, pump and dump, momentum, so on and so forth. And that's natural. That's not special to crypto. That's anything that's new, right? That's what the space attracts, right? So I think what you have to do if you want to be in this ecosystem is you have to decide, what game are you playing? Yeah. Are you playing the long-term structural? Do you believe in this? And is it more of a VC? You have a basket, you allocate what you can afford to lose, and you sit and you hold? Or are you there trying to trade and do it on leverage and follow the forums and follow the tweets? Like for me, the second one is a much, much tougher game, right? Not trying to say you can't be successful. I know a lot of very rich people on the crypto side who've done that. Can they replicate it? Probably not, right? So I think it just kind of comes back to that. But the space is much, much bigger than any person, regardless if you are, you know, one of the richest people on kind of the planet. So that's my view on that.
I appreciate that. I think the point you mentioned for a lot of us who are still learning about this business, you guys are more experts in the zone, is perhaps have a sense of optionality and put in about 5% of your assets that you have, your wealth. Do you lose 5%? You still survive, but that 5% can become 105% very, very quickly, and that so perhaps that's one of the ways to look at it and look at that type of put it in there, 5%, 10%, whatever you're happy to lose, and then hold and hang in there and enjoy the ride and not get too emotional about it because the market is just so emotional. George, you want to make a comment?
Yes, I believe that really coming back to the use case this is really where the value of the whole ecosystem brings, because at the end of the day, as mentioned by Kay, one of the things that has happened in this space is not just the attraction of funding, is the attraction of intellectual minds. And these intellectual minds are basically creating new technologies or digital transformation to change the way we do business. Let me give you an example. One of the largest telecom organizations in the world decided to use smart contracts as a way to disrupt its supply chain. They deal with hundreds of suppliers, lots of contracts, lots of annual adjustments, over 50 mobile operations, cellular towers, mobile phones, spare parts. Now, the bottom line is a correct implementation of a smart contract driven smart supply chain is allowing this organization to save between 100 and 200 million dollars. This is real savings on the ground. So that really means there is a direct impact between the way a technology is being implemented successfully and how that technology is impacting a business on the ground to return a better value to its shareholders. This is the biggest impact that we're going to see over the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years. The use cases of implementation of enterprise blockchain, whether they're driven by coins or not driven by coins, or they're driven, otherwise it matters a lot or less. What matters is the real tangible value that is being created by this new technology without having any intermediaries in the middle. The two parties that enter into a contractual relationship are able to achieve business in a much faster way, with much lesser friction than it was otherwise possible.
Right. Thank you, George. I think we have two quick polls left that I'd like to throw them in. Then we'll do a rapid answering of the questions, like 10, 20-second yes, no responses. And then we'll start pulling the whole thing together, because we've widened the conversation a lot, and we'd like to sort of bring in the dots and connect them. So one of them is on crypto FX. I mean, as another asset class. I will launch this poll, and so if you would like to trade in crypto FX, is it available? Would you actually trade in that, or you still feel it's too early and you want to hold and see? So here's a question on a very specific trading approach on crypto FX. So George, I mean, what's the difference between a crypto FX or any other FX? Is the same thing another currency?
Actually, the same thing. The only difference is that we have about 200 currencies around the world. We have 10,000 crypto coins, and we have one being created every 30 to 60 seconds. So that really means the amount of trading and the speed of trading that can be done, it's of a much higher frequency. We can deal with 18 digits of decimal points. So something that goes from 0.018 to 0.017, that means it went up 10x. That also means that because these markets, FX markets of cryptocurrencies, operate 24/7, they can no longer be done by human beings. What really means is that the application of 24/7 artificial intelligence that combines high dense information about the status of those coins, the potential value of those coins, the sentiment market of those coins via tweets, Telegram, chat groups, WhatsApp, and so on, will enable these bots to make substantial returns. And we're talking about Earlier, our friend Kay mentioned that we must make at least 15% a year to kind of break even. When we talk about crypto world, people are talking about making 15% a day, or at least, or at the worst case, 15% a month. So this is the kind of returns that people are expecting in this crypto world. So when we mentioned to them 15% a year, they said 15% per day, you meant? So, there's a big disconnect between the traditional world and this new highly accelerated world that we live in of cryptocurrencies 24/7, 365 days a year.
Thank you. Thanks, George. Kay, you are an expert in this sort of space on the crypto FX. It's a Saxo product also. And as George just mentioned, that in this 24/7 market and very, very minute movements, a lot of it will be automated and traded through AI and bots and so on. How do we need to be looking at this type of product, and who should be involved in it? You get a 44% saying yes, they would trade in it. So that was the result here.
Yeah, so I think a few thoughts from my side, right? This is what I believe, whether it's right or wrong, you all have to keep what resonates and discard the rest, add your own, right? I think when you're looking at the space from a macro perspective, any good macro girl, boy will tell you they like to walk downhill, which basically means they want to catch the trend, right? They want to do the easy move. They don't like to walk uphill. You want to catch, the underlying current, so to speak. So when you have something where you're not sure how it's going to do over the next six months, maybe not even 12 months, but over 3 to 5 years, you're fairly certain, it's a VC approach, 3-5%, because you're trying to make 3, 5, 10x, maybe even more from those allocations, and you're prepared to lose that, right? That's more long-term. Now, trading it is a whole different game, to George's point. Whole different game. I would approach it from the context of when you have something that can move 15% a day easy, why would you need a lot of leverage? Number one, right? Number two, there's definitely certain weekly seasonal factors, such as, over the weekends, for instance, because there's less liquidity. So you tend to have the price can be bullied easier. And that was a very interesting thing that you saw in the previous bull market, where we used to run into consecutive weeks where the price would gap up and up and up and up on the weekends. Most recently, it seems like it's been going down and down and down kind of on the weekends. So it's just a different game, right? And you have to kind of take that into account. But, for me, the way I approach things, it's less is more. I will have a more focused asset allocation personally than, let's say, 20, 30, 50. But the worst thing is not taking a loss. It's not making a mistake. It's missing a big exponential move. And I think that is a problem if you play in the trading game. Yes, you may make 50% a week. You may even make 100%. But the risk is you get stopped out, you leave the space, and it will go on to do 3 to 5 to kind of 10x. But obviously, to everyone their own, and that's how I would think about it, right?
Super. Now that's a very interesting response. Thank you for that. Out of respect for the people who have put a lot of questions in the Q&A, with your permission, we will go into the Q&A session, and if all three panelists can keep their mics on, I won't specifically ask questions, but a quick comment, yes, no, does it work, over the next 5 minutes, if you can sort of do that. My colleague and my coach, my chairman of our company, Paul Epping, he's been very active. He said, Khurram, doubling or tripling is always related to value. Is this deflationary effect from what Kay was talking about? Yes, no?
Well, it's on top of what Kay is saying, because that is what Kay is saying is just for you to be able to zero out. Right. What we're seeing with the deflationary effect of, at least on Bitcoin, is that it surpasses that. And we don't know exactly what. According to us, it surpasses it by approximately double or triple. So between 2 and 2.5 times, it surpasses the currency printing that central banks are doing.
Right. Its question is to Kay, and is how can the market value be built and set to 1.5 trillion where the market is so volatile? Isn't this relative going up and down, Kay?
Yeah, but I mean, I think, that's the market. It's your choice. Do you want to participate or don't you want to participate, right? So let's take a look at MicroStrategy, right? Where we have someone who's famous or infamous, however you want to look at it. If you do a little bit of Googling, you'll know what happened during the .com. They're doubling down on crypto in regards to how much they continue to buy. But guess what? As a shareholder, you can decide, do you buy the share? Do you sell the share, right? And, that's the whole point. If you think that it's 1.5 trillion and the 70 million wallets out there is all crazy people and it's a big Ponzi scheme, or there's going to be coordinated regulation that will take it down, so on and so forth, whatever the cons and whatever the challenges are, that's fine. You don't have to participate, at the end of the day. Like, my role here is by no means to convince anybody, to tell you how I think about it. And from the perspective of how I approach markets and life, trading to me and investing is life, right? It's all about benefit versus cost, reward versus risk, etc. When I see something that is as interesting, as exciting as crypto, it is an allocation or a bet that you have to take. Sure. It can't be any other way. Right?
Another friend of mine, he used to be in the shipping industry, Fazl Boy. He asked a question: does crypto universe move against global central banks' trends towards AML and control of a wealth movement? And his follow-on question was: does this play into the hands of anonymous movers of capital, inclusive of terrorists, drug smugglers, armed traffickers, etc.? So it's a very specific question. If there's a comment, fine. If not, then I'll move on. Abdurrahman Abaid, he's a very interesting guy. He also is trying to build into how crypto is different from NFT, and he asked a question. I think we've answered a lot of that. Another colleague and friend, sorry, you want to mention that? Talk about that? He was talking about crypto and NFT, what's the difference and how, but I think we've addressed that to a great extent.
There's two questions, actually. The first one about the capital for terrorists, anonymous. One has to say that things like Bitcoin are not fully anonymous. They're pseudo-anonymous. So with the right tools, you can actually track down the wallets that are being used. And that's why there's been a few arrests and a few cases, and there's a few people in jail as a result. NFTs are part of crypto, but not every crypto is an NFT. For example, Bitcoin is not an NFT because it's fungible. Non-fungible means it has a unique ID or like a serial number. Go ahead.
I understand. Jamil Janjua from Pakistan, he said, the first world is progressing exponentially in all kinds of technologies and future currencies, whereas the third world and developing world is lagging far behind in the sustainable global peace, disparity of income. What should be done, could be done to reduce this gap? This is a big, broad question in terms of humanity and society. Is this going to help us in that direction? Is actually one of the key questions that I have as part of my closing questions. A quick comment on that, and then we start closing because we're running out of time now.
I do believe that the blockchain technology, as we know it, is exponential technology that will introduce inclusivity, which means it will enable people that otherwise have not been able to help themselves by providing them access to capital that otherwise they have not had in the past. Is this going to fix all economical problems? I don't think so, but it will fix some of them.
Yeah. Another interesting pushback from Fazil, and this is for you, Kay, and that is, how can you have oil and gas exploration contracts without terms and conditions, lawyers, etc.? Contracts just don't get executed by using a token without a great deal of complexity and clarity, which needs to be checked and counter-checked. Quick comment on that, please, Kay.
Yeah, before Kay starts, I would like to just tell Kay that there was the first, and Mr. Puzzle Boy, is that there was the first smart contract done out of Calgary. for an oil and gas contract. So it's already been done in the oil and gas industry where blockchain has been shown as a use case.
Thank you, Philip. Kate, since it was addressed to you, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I got to be honest. I didn't quite understand kind of the question.
The question is that oil and gas is so complex, and therefore, for that complexity, you need proper contracts and lawyers and stuff like that. How can you just execute and just move on without any hindrance?
I mean, listen, I'm not trying to say that there's not things that are very kind of complex. But again, look at how early the space is, right? We will get there, you know, is the whole point. My whole point here is I can get into an agreement with you, with George, with Khurram. We can do it on a token. I can post the collateral, and we don't need a lawyer. We don't need an accountant, right? And if I don't keep up to my end, you guys will get access to my collateral, right? And this is literally the first time in human history that we've been able to do this. Like, this is huge. This is huge. So I appreciate you may be sitting in your industry and saying, well, there's these level of complexity and so on and so forth. Yeah, maybe now. But the direction and where we'll get to, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years, we're going to get to there. So that would be my viewpoint. And I think rather than asking it in, you know, a little bit of a defensive way, think of it as an opportunity, right? Everyone throws disruptive as if it's a negative thing. No, it's an opportunity. You know, be part of the people who are moving more towards it, towards where technology is going, because you can't stop that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah,
Tariq, just to add to Kay's comment, it's so interesting because I was just explaining this to one of my elderly family members who's in his mid-70s. I was telling him it's like the beginning of the internet, right? If it's beginning of the internet, we cannot go and set up Amazon right now. You know, we got to let the internet grow. Then there will be Amazons and Facebooks and virtual banks and stuff, which all operate on the internet, right? But if it's just the beginning of the internet, we are just learning how to send email. So let's give it time, and and the growth is exponential right now. Within the last 6 months, there are 46 million Bitcoin holders or crypto holders in the United States, which are not those wallets which Kay is talking about. These are centralized wallets in Coinbase and Kraken and all of these, which are different from the 75 or $80 million wallets that exist on the blockchain, you know, which is completely. So you can take one wallet of for example, someone like Coinbase, which has a million of customers within that ecosystem.
Thank you for that. I think it's a lovely way of putting that context, which Kay started with. And I think we will end our formal conversation around this at this point. With your permission, we'll launch a little poll, which is just to get your overall satisfaction of this particular session, how you saw it. And then I will go to each one of the panelists to give us a 30-second takeaway in terms of what we should be able to do. So here are some questions, folks. This has been one of the most active sessions ever that we have done in terms of the chat, which basically means people were involved. And it wasn't just 1 or 2 people, it was a bunch of people. Same with the questions, 25 questions came through. And that's also a very significant number. So I think it's a testament to our guests and also to the topic and how the whole thing is coming together. And I think this is really quite special that we are able to do this. So I'll give it another 20 seconds to enable people to look at this, and then I'll share the results. And with a smile on everybody's face, we would be in a position to close. Okay, so just about 58% of people have voted, which is the others are falling apart right now because they're confused on their portfolio right now. So I'll end the polling here. while we're still ahead of the game. and and here we go. So, folks, you're the panelists. You were the stars of the show. 53% excellent, 38% good, 9% average. I need to talk to those people to help us to improve. So, in terms of impact, and very impactful and impactful between the two of them, that's the vast majority. And I think that's a very interesting outcome for us. Number three was, what would you improve in the overall experience of the workshop? And somebody mentioned content, and I'm wondering what that means. If they can put a couple of comments in the chat, how can we improve the content? Because I think we've covered a very broad spectrum. But 50% said nothing will be changed. I think that is a very strong case also. And last question is, would you recommend this session or similar ones to friends and colleagues? And we had an overwhelming 84% yes. So there we go. Great results. Thank you very much indeed for everybody's participation in this interactive session. The final words, George, a takeaway from you in terms of 30 seconds. What should we look out for, and how should we go forward?
My takeaway from this is that we're still in the early days of blockchain and crypto, enterprise blockchain as a whole. And I think the future looks extremely bright given the attention of finance of this industry, as well as the creativity and the intellectual minds that are spending time in this industry. And the future looks extremely bright. I think what we have to do is remove from this industry the detractors, the things that make us lose credibility. That's all.
Thank you. Khurram, final thought?
Well, thank you so much, Tariq, for putting together, and thank you, George and Kay, and thank you to all the audience. It has been very insightful, and it's been extremely interesting for me to be part of this panel. One of the things, because we're running a public company, I cannot basically say a lot of things based on the regulators. But, the thing is, I always say, even for the kid, if you teach them, maybe they will learn, but if you involve them, they will learn, right? So if I would say to the world is get involved, right? Learn about it, maybe invest a little bit in it, right? If you're not interested in investing in crypto directly, invest in public companies like Mr. MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor, or iMining. But you always need to talk to an investment advisor before you make an investment decision. So I believe it is an important time for the audience to get involved, get involved in a very little way. And the first step of getting involved is read the white papers, which will give you a very good understanding on how an 8-page concept paper is going to disrupt a 5,000-year monetary policy of the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that context. And I think we have a lot to follow up from this. Kay, can we have a final? You started, we'll finish with you. What's our takeaway? And what are your thoughts and feelings after this sort of fairly wide session?
Yeah. So that was awesome with Khurram. I've tried to put a link there, which hopefully will take you to the Bitcoin white paper, which I think is the genesis of all of this. So I think closing thoughts on my point are this, right? Obviously with the caveat that, hey, pioneers are celebrated when they're right, and no one talks about the crazy people that got it all wrong, right? Yes. But, I believe that the future is here. It's unevenly distributed, right? I think that people should remember that even on the onset of the internet, Bill Gates thought the internet was not a big deal, right? So by that, I mean, it's not unusual to see something that's new, something that's emerging, being contested, being vilified, being discussed as it should be, right? I don't believe that one should have a maximalist or minimalist approach. I think there is a room for both DeFi and CeFi, and I think it enhances everything at the end of the day. For me, central banks, governments, sovereign wealth funds, family offices, you know, diversifying their treasury, diversifying their balance sheets, however you want to think about it. From my perspective, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. I think everyone should keep in mind that 15% is the expansion of G4 balance sheets from central banks. That's how much fiat is growing every year. The only asset class that has consistently outperformed that so far has been crypto, right? And it's really not about Bitcoin or Ethereum or Cardano or Flow or REN or Uniswap or anything like that. It's really about the fact that we have the ability to participate in a decentralized world with a decentralized asset that has never existed ever before for as long as we kind of have known. And lastly, you know, we have 8 billion people. We have 4 billion of them on smart cell phones, about 5 billion of them with internet connections. And we have about 70 million blockchain wallets. Bitcoin is only 7% of gold. It's only 1.5% of US equities. I still believe that, you know, there's a lot more to kind of the upside before it becomes a much more mature market.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments. You started with some amazing contextual numbers and so on, and one of them, which I'd like to end with, because we have gone over now, the key one that I'd like to end with is the fact that 2.5 billion are unbanked and haven't been reached as part of your context structure that you had. The social impact for something like this could be significant. The tokenization and fractionalization of new products and new economies that can be created around that are very significant. The technologies that are coming in are growing exponentially, and I think that would help us. You know, whenever I talk about any of these sessions, and I always start with the word trust. We need to build trust, and that will happen over time with learning, unlearning, understanding, winning, losing, but we need to build trust over time. And the other one is a little bit of empathy. Empathy for the people who can benefit from this, and we should put in our overall frame and the intent out there in terms of what social impact we can make, how we can help countries, how we can bring people out of poverty and so on. And here is a new tool that we have, and I believe if we put our minds, our collective minds and collective intelligence towards this, we should be able to start finding good solutions around it. And I hope people will get involved in this. And as Khurram said, you know, one of the ways of learning is just buy a small amount, I don't know, $1,000 or something like that, that you can throw away. That's the best way to learn, because then you'll work that and then sell $100 and see what happens, and buy $50 and see what happens. And that's the learning process. And I think that's essentially where we are. And so with those words, I'm extremely grateful to Kay joining us late at night, to George, who is from home at the moment, and Khurram all the way from Canada. So it generally is a global event and connecting the dots from all over the world. We had people from Africa, we had people from our region here. So it was really a very broad global event. And congratulations to modern technology that enables us to do that. So with that, I'd like to say goodbye. God bless, take care, and hope to catch up again soon. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tarek. Thanks, Khurram. Thanks, George. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. All the best, please.